Custom code is not an asset, it's a liability. And every custom code, regardless of the language, will over time become a certain technical debt because you have to take care of this. And clean core is a way to, I would argue, reduce the debt in it. Still, you have to maintain your custom code, regardless if it's BTP built in any language or if you do it on stack in ABAP. But the key question here is, does your custom code harm your upgrade?
Thanks everybody for joining another edition of the never-ending climb for a stronger supply chain and procurement for companies running SAP. And today we're going to talk about something that has a bunch of people all tied up in knots. What the hell does clean core mean? And with me to help with this question that is on a lot of people's minds, and the answer's been oversimplified and twisted for some, and it's like that game of broken telephone. So let's go straight to the source. We've got Rudy and Steffen with us. Rudy has been with SAP for decades. He's now the head of engineering for S4 Private Cloud, which is a very, very important role because there is nobody better qualified to talk about what clean core means than the guy responsible for making sure the product works every time it upgrades. And Steffen, who is the head of BTP product management, which in many cases is what you would need to go and extend it, but not always. So with Rudy's decades of experience in development, experience, product management, and Steffen's experience in customer developer and partner roles and DSAG and as an executive leading SAP organizations, we've got a team that can get you the straight goods. So Rudy, Steffen, thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, Ron, absolutely. And you brought a fun topic with you, right? It's really a good place.
Yeah, it's on a lot of people's minds, right? And when we think about the giant migration of everybody that's trying to go from ECC to S4 and trying to get the most out of it, there's a lot of investments that were made that people don't want to feel like they have to throw it all away and start fresh. Sometimes they should, sometimes they shouldn't, and there's mixed opinions. And there's this term being thrown around, clean core. And as a customer and a partner and a solution extension partner that builds add-ons for SAP, it's near and dear to me. And there's different ideas of what does clean core mean? And I'd love maybe, Steffen, can you start us off with what does clean core mean from SAP's perspective, from product management, product engineering, from the people that make the stuff?
Absolutely, absolutely. And as you already indicated, there's a lot of fiction around this topic. So let's try to carve this out and focus here today really on the facts. So in essence, it is a standardized guideline for all elements of the core so that you can easily upgrade your system. More formally, I would argue clean means that it is up to date, it is transparent, unmodified, consistent, and cloud compliant with everything that is around the core, so your ERP. This in turn does not mean that you must not have any custom code, but you have to follow certain rules. And the key aspect to consider is when it comes to extensions is that you decouple your custom code from SAP code so that one does not affect the other. For example, you can use APIs as a technical contract as a means for that. And it is predominantly focusing on the private cloud because here you have many options how you can extend your core. You can do it in a clean way and in other ways. While public cloud is clean core by definition. You still can extend it, but you only have options that follow these clean core paradigms. So in essence, it's a way how to extend a system and how to maintain your system environment to keep it upgradable so that you can follow SAP's innovation journey and ideally be on the always latest or N-1 release.
I love it. And I think what I love about what you did there is you were talking about what clean core is. And you were also talking about what it's not. And the what's clean and what's not is it's a bit of a continuum, and there's a lot of different opinions on what that looks like. There's something super important that I think you touched on, and that's clean core. And part of why Rudy is here is primarily focused at the Rise private cloud and the on-premise S4 organizations, because S4 public cloud is always clean, right?
Yeah, that's profoundly true as you put it, because I mean, public cloud requires extension just as other solutions. So there is no such thing like a finished ERP where a big corporation just lives up to the standard as it is. So there's always something that a custom adds on top, some fields, some integration to a new application. So all the usual stuff, there's nothing different, public cloud versus private cloud. However, the way that this extension is enabled is clean core by definition, because in the end, and that's also what's happening, we're upgrading in the public cloud all customers on one weekend, right? Unthinkable in private cloud or on premise, because there are all these individualizations. So the model of how you can use the solution is clean core by definition, to the point that Steffen has mentioned that clean core is a lot about being upgradable. So we must ensure, and there is no way around it. So this is taken care of by technology and not by governance.
I love it. And I think that idea of who needs to be worried about clean core, and if you're on S4 public cloud, you can pretty much sign off now and save yourself the next 10 minutes because you're there. Check. If you're on premise or you're in Rise private cloud, this is where it gets more important. And I think there's a lot of CIOs, directors, architects, managers that hear noise about what clean core means. And then sometimes people are telling them, and I know I've talked to some customers that have been told, and they've even mandated no ABAP because that's a dirty core. And this, of course, feels a little bit funny because this can lead to some really funny outcomes of the combination of tools that are then mandated to be used to solve what maybe could be solved more simply. And that sometimes gets to this myth that either ABAP is dead or that any ABAP code is now dirty core, but you can write ABAP in S4 public cloud. So by definition, this is not dirty. It's simply rules, as you put it, around how it needs to be used. So what do you think about that? And what would you add for when to use what?
Yeah. So maybe that quote, it's coming from Google, that custom code is not an asset, it's a liability. And every custom code, regardless of the language, will over time become a certain technical debt because you have to take care of this. And clean core is a way to, I would argue, reduce the debt in it. Still, you have to maintain your custom code, regardless if it's BTP built in any language or if you do it on stack in ABAP. But the key question here is, does your custom code harm your upgrade? And Clean Core provides a way that even with ABAP on stack, you can build your extensions in a way that it does not harm your upgrade. Now,
right there, Steffen, that is something more people need to hear.
Sure, there's a but. Does it now mean that you should build everything with ABAP on stack? No. And you ask when to use what. Honestly, I can explain some patterns and indications when to go on stack or when to go side by side. Eventually, it is a decision case by case. And we can post later maybe in the chat or on your blog post some links where I can point you or the listeners to. And let's start with the on-stack side. So if your extension is part of a highly integrated business process, then this is an indicator to stay on stack. If you want to extend an existing S/4HANA application, for example, you just want to add a field, a custom field, it does not make sense to replicate and rebuild the entire application on side by side and then add that field there. There are key user tools where you can build in a clean core way your custom fields. Or in some cases where you require really fast SQL access to SAP data, or you have heavy data exchange that would cause, if you do it side by side and have a frequent exchange, either from a TCO or from a performance perspective, would cause an issue, an indicator to stay on stack. Or if you require strong consistency with SAP transactions, so if you have to do an update in the same logical unit of work, you save some master data, and if that fails, you don't want to have an inconsistent state, for example. So these are indications to stay on stack and follow clean core guidance, which means using ABAP Cloud, etc., and not just doing it in the classical way. So decouple through the use of public APIs or using the 3-tier extensibility model, and we can post this link as well.
So,
now,
Steffen, there's something important there. When I had a conversation over lunch with a customer, they had been told by a large organization that was helping them that it was absolutely forbidden to put an on-save validation for an invoice into the normal place that you would have put it before, just to do a quick validation on a couple of business rules that were right there. And they were told they needed to go and move that over to have the check done over in a side-by-side example before they could bring it back. But it was really a simple compare 3 or 4 fields as part of a before saving and return an error message and stop the save if that was the case. What I think I just heard, just to double check to make it like a concrete example, tie back to a real life conversation, was that sounds kind of silly to you too.
So the answer is, again, coming from the goal of clean core. What do we want to achieve? We want to achieve a seamless as possible upgrade.
Yep.
To allow our customers to stay as current as possible. This is the guiding principle. And now, from a technical point of view, we do this as we use, in case of on-stack development, ABAP Cloud, that follows certain principles. And these principles are that your custom code does not interfere, so no modification, that's obvious, but also that you, for example, do not use a global variable from SAP in your ABAP, or that you do not do direct access to an SAP table, or use a function module that is not released, etc., etc.
Yep.
And therefore, ABAP Cloud ensures technically, with compiler checks, etc., that you follow these rules. So ABAP language version 5 technically only allows building on-stack code, regardless if it's PCE or public cloud, to build code that follows these standards. And to your example, I would argue it depends on where you put that code. If you put it at a released extension point, you're good to go. If you start modifying, well, not a good idea. If it's a legacy user exit, it's technically not compliant. It depends on where you put that code. But I definitely recommend having a read of the ABAP extensibility guide, which I will post you the link.
That's super, super helpful, Steffen, because that sort of myth can create, if it's taken to the extreme, can create huge extra expense for organizations and overcomplicate something that could, should, or would be done simply and quickly. And I think that's going to help a lot of customers move a lot more quickly and stay clean.
Yeah.
When we think about the examples of extensions that you were using, there's some examples where, of course, ABAP is no longer appropriate. A core mod is just a simple, dead easy one and shouldn't have been done in the first place. But when we think about other examples where we maybe used to think about ABAP as the standard default solution, what would you recommend teams at the leadership level watch and listen for as examples of when they need to remind their teams to level up and pay attention to the modern standards?
Yeah. So my immediate reaction to this is it's not a question of ABAP or not ABAP. It's a question of on-stack or side-by-side, because also on BTP, you can build your extensions in ABAP. So it's not a question, okay, I choose ABAP, then I have to stay on stack. If I choose a different language, yes, then I have to go side by side, but also side by side, I can use ABAP. So it's more a question of the architectural pattern. And let me make some examples or indications when I clearly recommend customers to go side by side. First one, remember, decoupling is the key word when it comes to clean core. So if you have an application that you want to build that you can clearly decouple from the core, then it's definitely an indicator to go side by side. Second, if you think of a hub scenario, so you have an application that integrates with multiple backend systems, etc., this is again an indicator to build that side by side on the BTP and then leverage the BTP capabilities for integration. Or if you look at it, I mean, you are a partner. If you look and you want to build a multi-tenant partner SaaS solution, you should do this on the BTP. You shouldn't build it on an on-stack system and then try to manage the connectivity to your customers. Or if you have a mobile scenario, you want to build an application that, for example, uses native mobile functions, camera, etc., or that seamlessly integrates with your device. For all these mobile cases, or even if you want to use an offline scenario, for example, build it on the BTP that is fully fledged with capabilities to build mobile applications that then connect back to the S4 system or any other system.
Process automation. Super helpful.
Yeah, process automation is a very common scenario. If you look at enterprise automation scenarios touching multiple systems, you wouldn't try to do this with an S4 system and try to do it on stack. Users that you don't want to have on your S4 system, you don't want to allow them accessing directly your S4 with a typical license, but you want to shield your S4 system with an application stack before. Scalable, elastic scenarios, peak load. You don't want to put your core system at risk if you have scalable scenarios, peak load scenarios that are hard to predict. Or if you want to decouple the life cycle. Let's assume you have, let's say, weekly transports in your S4 environment, but you want to have an, let's say, agile build application that is really, let's say, daily or hourly updated with new releases. You can do so by having this on the BTP and remaining your core with your life cycle and operations. And coming back to the language topic, if you want to address the large audience of JavaScript, Java developers, etc., ABAP developers are a rare species. And if you want to address these pools of developers, they easily use BTP capabilities to build their application. I could continue, but these are typical indications and patterns when BTP as side by side is a very valid choice. And we recently launched the BTP guidance framework on help.sap.com. And if you scroll there down to the developer's guide and the development use cases, there you find some examples going into the direction I just mentioned. And there is, it's a little bit older, but still valid, the practical guide for senior IT leadership. I can post you the link as well. There's also metrics when to use what. And these are good assets to build knowledge about when to use what, but you also need to establish the governance around that. That really your partners, your teams adhere to these rules and do not build classic ABAP as they maybe did it the last decades.
I would like to add one. Sorry, I would like to add one sentence to what Steffen just said. So fully subscribe to what he's saying, but what then some customers kind of look at as say sometimes doing something like quick and dirty in ABAP seems so cheap, right? If you bring something to BTP, there's this demarcation line where you offload, where you're not, and you have to integrate. So there's always something extra to a degree. And some customers have been very smart about it. They introduced the concept of lifetime costs for what they're doing. So instead of just looking at the project cost, where doing a small ABAP something is maybe 15K, it immediately is $1 million if you look at the lifetime cost, what it does to you over 10 years of upgrading, of maintaining, and so on. And it's a change of perspective. But that view is never precise, and I'm not pledging to do that very precisely, but already talking about it and being honest about the follow-on costs as you do the decision, because this is the moment to do it right. And then you will find that many more things make a lot of sense to decouple than you would think, right? And I think that is kind of usually the balancing act, which is then the cost in the project, obviously, right? But it's the lifetime cost for the company. And I think that's something to balance in this decision process along with the technical differentiation.
What I love about this is it's forcing a harder look at what so often happens in these conversations and projects is we've got to have X. Okay, is X worth this over the next 7 years? And, this is not only the cost of building it once, it's the cost of testing it through the upgrades, making sure it still works through the upgrades, making sure that it maybe needs to be fixed and adjusted. And Steffen, like you said, it is perhaps a liability over time, and it may be perceived by the business as something they need today, but the question of why they need it is often very, very important. Sometimes the most challenging compromises that I've seen made on projects are where the business isn't ready to change yet. So a compromise is made and sometimes adjusted or adapted a few years later. The teaspoon of sugar to help the medicine go down is sometimes worth the agreement to move forward with something to go live. And balancing this is one of the most challenging topics for leaders of this sort of program. And I think that longer term view of what does custom code really land you in the long run, unless it's a significant competitive advantage and it's done in a way that it's decoupled, whether that's decoupled in a tiny way on Stack or whether that's decoupled in a more significant way on BTP, is something I think a lot of organizations need to insert this question in the governance, just like you said. It's definitely something organizations will struggle with, especially where leaders of the IT organization come from an infrastructure background and not an applications background. So this is often the organizations that have a harder time getting more comfortable with this sort of a decision point. Where did clean core come from? Is it just a marketing term, or is there I understand there to be a little more history to this. Rudy?
Yeah, absolutely. Because in the end, and we're talking about, being upgrade ready and treating a system well, it has been a best practice forever, if you wish. We even had some programs in the 2000s timeframe, which were called Back to Standard. So some of you may recall there was a lot of effort looking with customers where you deploy something and you would, at a later point in time go back. But guess what? No one's ever done that. Because if you do these things as a individual project. You replace something that's working for you with something in standard that will again work for you, but you always have something more important to do. So it's very difficult to get a business case of just back to standard. And this is why it's now surfacing with this overall move to S4. You are all re-platforming. So you anyway touch your system heavily. So instead of having a tidying up project, it's something where you put that as part of what you're doing. And so testing comes for free because you test anyway afterwards. So a lot of the costs that you would incur in a back to standard is something that you anyway do. So it's kind of an added work in doing it more sound technical wise, but it pays off dramatically. So to a degree, it was a best practice. And also, we have seen customers already in the ERP times that had deployed a clean core. I know of some customers who did enhancement package upgrades in 6 weeks. Every time an enhancement package came, 6 weeks later, they were on the latest. Because for them, it was kind of not a non-issue, but a completely different issue than it is if you're heavily modified, if you're heavily extended. And also, it's something where, it pays off over time because as you upgrade regularly, you will consume so much more from standard, which is the value of the upgrade in itself. But it's also the avoidance of complexity in your system, right? Because it's kind of a vicious circle. If you're off the hook, and the average upgrade in ERP times, they were around 8-9 years, right? It's ridiculously long. But if I go from 8 years to 8 years, I never consume any standard because whenever something cool is there, I'm on the wrong release. So I bolt on my own stuff and I bury myself deeper and deeper. So there is an intrinsic business case of staying current. And this is why we're so adamant about, as you re-platform, please ensure that you can stay current this time, that you can stay on top of things, that you can consume things and avoid your bolt-ons. We know of many customers who ended up with 8,000 bolt-ons, individual developments. It's not a big number. I know even bigger ones. So this is dramatic. I know customers who talk about the sediment in the system when they talk about the history of all these innovations, which basically kill them in any type of innovation. And that is counterintuitive if you look at the speed of innovation that you need in times like today, right? How rapid can you adopt AI in your landscape? If you're not on the latest release, it's going to be difficult because the enablement of any provider to you is on the latest releases. Again, you have to build a bridge yourself, which buries yourself deeper, which in turn is lack of speed of innovation for your business, which kind of is a conflict with your relationship with the business. So, I may paint a big picture around the clean core topic, but in essence, I think it can be the one thing that changes a lot of what you're suffering.
Yeah, and I think when upgrading, doing the technical upgrade, I know our last FPS2 upgrade, I think took our team 6.5 weeks, and that included deployment, testing, the whole thing. This is one of those things that would have been impossible even just 5-10 years ago for many organizations. But the trick is allocating enough time during that period to get the attention of the business groups that have some new toys, new features, new capability that add value that they need to take a little bit of time to go and look at and then see how they can adapt in. And that's the friction that I think it's a must. It's something that we need to start embracing, not avoiding.
I want to echo that statement because traditional model of value generation with IT is all about I budget the next project. Business has asked for this. This is the value. This is what we deliver, match. If you're upgrading, you can change that around and say, guess what? Here's cool things coming. What do you want to consume? Usually that's not the case because if you upgrade every 8 years, that's a non-starter because you're off the hook for all these discussions. But as you move rapidly, you can consume value as it's getting presented to you. And that's a completely different game, which we usually don't play.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at one point, and I'm even quoting Rudy, it's like training the muscle. The first upgrade you do after 8 years is a painful exercise. But if you do it regularly, you're used to, the entire organization is used to. And then clean core is a prerequisite to make this happen. And the organization is used to and is trained to do this frequent upgrades.
Yeah, it is. It's just like getting your exercise every day. When you get up and you get your exercise every day and you suddenly need to go run 10 kilometers or 7-8 miles, whatever, it's not so bad. But if you're sitting on the sofa, guess what? That's going to feel like an absolute marathon. So I love that this set of questions and clarity is coming into focus through this conversation. And I know this is a little bit of a longer conversation than some of the shorter episodes that we usually do, but it's so important. And I think about questions from organizations that have made big investments in the past and say they've got hundreds of different iDocs that they're using for integration, and they've got this much budget to address something this year, and they want to get to the new stuff. And some people are saying, no, you have to get rid of all of the iDocs. But if somebody has to choose between something that's old and it works, and I'll call it maybe addressing technical debt before it comes due, or taking advantage of some of those new capabilities and getting their muscles, getting their environment ready, and taking advantage and adopting some of those new capabilities, what advice would you have for them?
Yeah, absolutely. Don't. I don't know what the English saying is in German. We say throw out the baby with the bathtub. Is that English as well?
Yeah. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Yeah.
So much.
Don't fix it.
Getting my lessons here, but I think this is how you have to think about it. There's an established technology, iDocs. Well, you are deployed in so many integrations. Just rip it out and replace it. No value really, right? It does what it does. But as you do the next round of innovation, maybe go to the next generation APIs, to modern ways of doing such kind of integrations. But a pure rip and replace is very difficult to judge. And it's really about innovation that you need to drive, right? I mean, again, if you go about Clean Core, some customers told me, one thing, first of all, since they deployed in 2003, upgraded every 10 years, never used any standard, they find so much in standard that has been built over 20 years that already reduces what they have to do. So Please understand the standard. This is an important part of the story. Second, as you build things out, really ask if it's needed or if it's just strongly desired by business. You will find that very often it's just strongly desired. Don't do those things if you can afford. And the other is then decide with a lifetime cost perspective, left or right, in stack or adjacent. And that kind of then is really the trick. And you need to put some governance in place in the project of going there, but then in living in the system as well. It's a change of how you live with your system. All of a sudden you take care with a long-term aspect, right? It's not just the next project all the time. It's really about, having that long-term perspective built into your governance model, how you evolve with the system. And many customers, and this is really, I know quite some, who go down to a tenth of their traditional extension that they've built, like going down from 4,000 to 400. It's something that we regularly see, right? If the systems are 20 years old, so there is a lot of opportunity with this kind of approaches.
One of the things that leads me to is a question is if I'm an executive and I'm responsible for SAP and I'm thinking about, well, how do I even know how customized my system is? And one of the most useless metrics that often gets thrown around is I have 4,000 customizations, or I have this many customizations. But the next layer underneath that is, well, what is it? Is it well done? And I know there's been huge investments from SAP to help with that clarity. Can you tell folks about the new assessment and dashboard capability to help people monitor that?
Yeah, we have invested into a Clean Core dashboard that basically takes our definition of Clean Core and maps it to your system. Underlying is a lot of the measurements, part of them we anyway already know, right? So the code usage analysis and all those kind of things. So we make use of a lot of the ABAP tools, but we collate that data, put it into context, and also map it to the definitions that we've put in place. You will find it in SAP. For me, as a private cloud customer, you will always have that in the access, and that gives you the transparency on your system. And obviously, we are also evolving the model of, in a sense of a best practice, how to live with that data. So how to then drive action out of that. But again, it's nothing that, must happen overnight. It's a journey maybe also. So if you're already in the system, it's something that then maybe you do over time, but it will give you an ability to really get transparency and start a manageability of the overall topic.
What I love about that is it gives the leadership at the organizations running SAP somewhere they can look, because when somebody tells a new IT director who doesn't have an SAP background that your system has 4,000 customizations, it's so customized, you need to go greenfield. And they go, okay. Meanwhile, most of those were some iDocs that still work, and some on-save validations and some workflows, and they were pretty well done, and they still work, and they upgrade seamlessly. And that context, I think, can be used improperly, and giving leaders tools to help understand the nature of the customizations and how often it's used, which was one of my favorite capabilities that was introduced.
I mean, we see really that very often 50% of custom code is completely unused. And that is one that you can already throw out. The second thing I wanted to mention is that maybe one of the best ways of really going about understanding the quality of code is to switch on ABAP Cloud. Because all of a sudden your system checks the quality of your custom code in terms of upgradability, and you get a perspective on that. And it's built in a way that you can, on a very granular level, decide for which to use it or enforce it, and for which you use standard ABAP. But to analyze and then derive action out of it, I think it's a best practice today to, in your system, switch it on and grant exceptions to that for those where it doesn't work differently. And that exception granting should be done by only one or two or three. I mean, one, you always need to think of vacations or whatever. So this is where few people should be allowed to actually grant that exception.
So I know we need to land the plane here, and I'm just imagining that that Rudy and Steffen, you both have a couple of thoughts that you would want to leave folks. What do you want them to remember 6 weeks, 6 months from now? And maybe a little flavor of what are you seeing leading customers do that are succeeding with this?
Well, first, good news is they can watch the recording. Second, I mean, we touched upon this. In an ever faster changing world, standing still, even with your ERP system, is not an option. And if you want to benefit from the innovations, Rudy mentioned AI and a lot more, if you want to benefit from the improvements, if you want to benefit from the legal changes that you anyway pay for, this goes through being on the always current release. And then there are two distinctions. One is, if you are a greenfield customer, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Don't start building extensions the classical way, but follow clean core from day one. And if you are a brownfield customer, it's never too late. Start developing your way to clean. It will pay off. And clean core is not about avoiding extensions at all. It is a way how to outbalance standard and differentiation through extensibility, but in a guided and governed way.
Beautiful. Rudy?
Yeah, and I want to leave you with the thought that this is not theory. There are customers who are already living there, who have done this endeavor, right? I already mentioned a couple of examples. And to close out with maybe the final one, so this is maybe the most impressive. They were going down from more than 9,000 extensions that they've built to 5% of those. A lot of that on BTP, by the way, so that model also flies with this customer. And for them, the upgrade time went down from 18 months to something like 2 months. And if you think about that, what that means in terms of value for your company, this is dramatic, right? Again, it will be different for each and every customer, but we're not talking theory here. We're talking things that customers are already doing. And again, as we discussed some myth, maybe as the last point, think of it as something that is defined meaningful. It's about a benefit and not about a penalty. So if someone tells you you're disallowed for this or that, if you don't think it pays into upgradability, most likely it's wrong, right? We just covered a few of those, but I hope you got the gist of what we are striving for. So we're not trying to penalize something or taking something away. We're just trying to put a best practice in place and helping you to live up to that and not to ridiculously kill iDocs or something like that, right? Just for the sake of argument. No one's thinking that way. It's really about helping you get your strategic platform in place.
Rudy, Steffen, thank you so very, very much. I know anybody will benefit tremendously in helping them understand what the heck clean core is and get more out of it and make better decisions around that to help balance the need for standard with hemming those pants when you get a suit off the rack, because it's super hard to run fast if you don't hem those pants. And I deeply appreciate your time. Thanks, everybody. This has been another edition of the Never Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement on SAP. We will see you again next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.